Art, Life, and the Law. The Jerry Spence Interview, Part 1. Next on Wyoming Chronicle. Hello, I'm Richard Ager. Welcome to Wyoming Chronicle and Part 1 of our interview with Jerry Spence. He's known as the lawyer who never lost a criminal case. His high-profile clients include Randy Weaver of Ruby Ridge, Imelda Marcos, and Karen Silkwood's family. Time magazine called him the fastest gun in the West. Born and raised in Laramie with a law degree from UW, Jerry Spence has always made Wyoming his home, but his work and his legacy is for the nation. Jerry Spence began his public life in 1954, running for Fremont County Attorney. It had its risks, including an attempt on his life. But Spence carried on, prosecuting those who broke the law. Spence was on his way, moving his law office to bigger digs. His only loss? In a race to be Wyoming's congressman. But in the midst of success, he left it all behind. He put everything up for sale and moved to San Francisco to study painting. San Francisco didn't last, though Spence still paints. Most important, following his artistic impulse led him to greater achievements in the law and a new focus on defending the little guy. It is a life lesson he imparts to classes at the trial lawyers college he founded in Du Bois in 1994.
So today, what are we going to do? We are going to paint. Well, what do you know? What does that have to do with being a trial lawyer? Every presentation that you make to the jury has its counterpart in a painting. It has a beginning and it has an end. It has content. It has contrast. It has form. It has beauty. That's what your presentation to the jury contains. It contains you. So there's plenty of paint and there's plenty of paper. Go do it.
I feel very inadequate right now.
I've been practicing 30 years, so I have a lot of things I have to learn to undo before I can start on a new palette.
Like what?
Just to be more real. I get so passionate about my clients that sometimes I want to take somebody's head off on cross-exam, so I'm trying to learn how to love the other side.
Painting for the first time since childhood is just one step in breaking down internal barriers.
Shady Ray Foreman.
The first 3 days of the 3-week course are spent in psychodrama.
I'm so proud of you.
Oh, thanks, Daddy. To be a good trial lawyer, you should be able to reverse roles with your client. In other words, this isn't not a new concept, but it's to walk in another person's shoes.
You know, when you do the psychodrama, when you get up and sing, when you interact with people you don't know, these are all my brothers and sisters. I feel, I feel very close to them. So I don't know. It's tough to describe what Jerry's bringing out in me, but I like it. I like it. From where I was at, I feel like I've come a long way.
They don't just start with doing lawyering techniques. They're actually asked to look at themselves and their own methods that keep them away from understanding people.
And what better place for self-examination than at Thunderhead Ranch in the mountains east of Du Bois. When participants come to the Trial Lawyers College, they leave the outside world behind, literally. There's no TV, no internet, and if you really must place a cell phone call, your only choice is to come climb Cell Phone Hill. There is plenty of instruction on the art of opening statements, cross-examinations, and closing arguments, but here It all starts with a focus on the person before the law, as in this hypothetical injury case.
And I want justice for you, Kelly. And I want you to use your power, not only to give it to her, but to give it to every other honest woman and every other honest man who comes into a court and stands before her peers or his peers and tells you the truth and asks you for justice. Thank you.
Was in the spring, spring became the summer. Who'd have believed you'd come along?
I think when you just be real with the jury, and I think if you just be yourself and you grounded and you show them a little bit of yourself, and maybe they'll show you a little bit of themselves.
So after leading a rousing chorus of Sweet Caroline and painting a couple of paintings, what difference do you feel?
I feel a little freer and a little bit lighter, and I don't need to take myself as seriously as I think we all take ourselves far too often.
Sweet Caroline, good times never seem so good.
What was it about that pursuit that made you dedicate?
Well, what could a poor Wyoming boy do who was fairly vocal, but he didn't want to be a preacher? I mean, who used their speaking talents if they had whatever they had in that regard? How would you use them? I didn't want to be a preacher. I didn't want to be a teacher. And I never knew a lawyer. And I'd read some stories about great lawyers and thought that maybe that would be really fun to be a lawyer. So that's what happened.
I was wondering, when you started out as a young lawyer, whether you regarded it as a job or as a life.
Well, it was an opportunity to feed my face and the face of my wife and the face of my children. I had one child and was another one on the way. So it was a means by which to make a living.
At one point, actually, you decided to ditch the law and take up painting. What led to that, and how did that work out?
Well, the law, as I saw it at that time, was broken, and as I see it today, I still see that the justice system of this country is severely broken and does not offer anything except a promise, an empty promise to people of liberty and justice for all. It is not there. People can't get justice in this country. People believe that they can get justice until they need it, and then they can't get it. And I was about 38 years old. I had been in the law since I was 24 years old. I had accomplished about everything I could accomplish in the state of Wyoming. I had every verdict record in the state. I had the largest verdicts that people had ever heard of in this state. I'd never lost a criminal trial. And yet I was not providing justice. I couldn't provide justice. The system was wrong. And so what I thought to myself, what can I do with my life that would help this? And I thought, maybe I am a painter. I began painting in my first marriage in the misery of my life. And I would paint out my misery, and I'll paint out my imaginations and my senses and my feelings, and the paintings were stacking up, and And I got a great deal of pleasure from that and relief. And I thought maybe I should become a painter because I could teach people a lot about living through painting. Painting is nothing but a metaphor of life.
You've written about an incident that changed your life after your years as a corporate lawyer for insurance companies. Can you describe that day?
Well, this corporate gunslinger was defending an insurance company on behalf of a drunken woman who ran into an old man who was about ready to retire. He'd worked all of his life at a refinery in Casper. Can you imagine what it would be to spend your whole life working in a refinery, hoping that someday you could retire? And he was just retired and was going to spend his time with something that he'd wanted to do all of his life, and that was to be with his grandchildren and to go out and do things and to hike and to go fishing and all of these things. And he was injured by this woman that would never recover. And I took him on. They put him on the stand, and I took him on. And when I was finished with my cross-examination, he didn't look good to the jury. And the jury didn't give him anything. And Imogene, with whom I was having an affair, saw this going on, and she walked out of the courtroom. Little old Fanny just going out of that courtroom just like this, you know. And I stopped the cross-examination in the middle of that cross-examination and ran out after her. This is how arrogant and how much I believe
Did the judge have anything to say
no,
about that?
I owned this whole world as far as I was concerned. And I said, "What's the matter? Where are you going?" And she said, "That's disgusting, what you did to that old man." So later on, we're at she and I are at Safeway buying some kind of goodies for a celebration. And in front of me is this old man. And he's hobbling along, and he turns around, and I see who he is. And I say, "Oh, well, hello, sir." I said, I'm sorry what happened today in your case. He said, "Oh, that's all right, Mr. Spence." He said, "You were just doing your job." And I thought, is that my job? To cheat old men out of justice? So that night I'm with Imogene, and I said to Imogene, is that my job? And she didn't answer. Now these women, you know sometimes how powerful silence is. Something, by the way, that lawyers need to learn in a courtroom. In any event, I thought about it all night. And the next morning I got up and I told my partner, Bob Rose, who later became the chief of the Wyoming Supreme Court, Chief Justice of the Wyoming Supreme Court. I said, "Bob, we're not going to represent any more companies." I sent out letters to 40 insurance companies, and we've never looked back. It changed our lives.
You know, in the years since, of course, you have had quite a number of very high-profile cases. One that, of course, became famous not only from the case that you argued, but the movie that followed was the victory, or the case that you argued against Kerr McGee in the case of Karen Silkwood. How would you describe the sort of lasting effect of that case?
Well, I believe that we learned that corporate America would lie. The case developed that the proof of that. Maybe they would even kill to make money. We know that they will let people starve. We know that they will cheat old people and young people and helpless people and take their money and claim to be great businessmen. But would they lie? Will they murder to keep the privilege of making money? That's the question that was raised in the Silkwood case. And the jury answered that question with a huge verdict.
Another case, not involving corporations, but in this case the government, of course, was the Ruby Ridge case involving Randy Weaver. Many might say not an attractive client. He was a white supremacist. What made you decide to get involved in that case?
Well, I really didn't have any choice. The government had killed, the government with its unlimited power had decided that they were going to take Randy Weaver in and prosecute him, and I think wrongfully, for a crime that they caused. They set it up. They set him up to saw off a gun, and an undercover agent did. And then when he did it because he needed the money to buy some school clothes for their kids, they prosecuted him, and then they wanted him to flip and to become a snitch for them and go after others. And he said, I won't do that. And the government then decided they were going to bring him in. And Randy says, you're not going to bring me in. In effect, that's what it was.
Your involvement in that, in the sense I get, and you've talked a lot about how you become involved as a person in your cases. You must have had strong feelings about that case to take it.
Oh, absolutely. It was just a horrible, and as a matter of fact, the government later paid $3 million to those folks and they had a big hearing, a congressional hearing, and the FBI had an investigation of itself, and all the stuff that government does that goes nowhere. And they finally paid the family $3 million. But I have to say something here. I've been involved in the trial of cases against governments in defending people, little people, and even occasionally big people. And I have never, hear me, I have never once been in a single case over a period of 60 years in the courtrooms of this country that the government hasn't violated the law or misused its power. Never one case, not one. And they brag about a 98% conviction rate, and you can imagine why. They have this huge power, and they use it against little people.
At the time you said this is a murder case, but the people who committed the murder are not in court.
Absolutely. Totally.
You've represented a lot of well-known people, Imelda Marcos for one. You even represented a Miss Wyoming in a suit against Penthouse magazine. But I'm curious, what case in all of these years sort of sticks in your mind the most? What do you think is the most memorable?
In a way, your question is like, I have that question put to me often, and I stop to think about it like that often. But these cases they're like your children. And they have an importance of their own in you. And when it's over, that case is done and the next child is born. And you would almost say, like any father, the case that stands out most clearly in my mind after all these years is my last one. So I really can't answer that question.
Actually, that's a good answer, I think. There was a difficult time that you have talked about because you do oppose capital punishment, but in one case, back in 1978, you actually acted as a special prosecutor, or as the prosecutor in a capital case. But when the defendant was convicted and, of course, later executed, you changed your mind, and I'm wondering what sort of evolution you went through at that point.
I never really changed my mind about capital punishment. I've always been against capital punishment, even when I was a young prosecutor. In those days, in the early days, if somebody was charged with murder, and convicted of first-degree murder, the sentence was death. Period. And you then had to go to the court and ask the court for leniency, or to the jury for leniency in certain cases. But in the Hopkinson case, which is the one you're talking about, I was faced with a dilemma, a conflict that one faces, that tests one. It tests who you are. And we don't always pass those tests to ourselves, even. And Hopkinson had murdered one of my good friends, Vince Vihar. And he'd murdered he paid a kid to blow up the house. My kid went out and got some beaver dams dynamite that his father had, and they threw it into the house where Vince was living in Evanston, Wyoming, blew him and his wife and his 15-year-old, killed 3 people, and injured a third, who's now a lawyer in Wyoming, good lawyer. And Hopkinson was arrogant about it. So I took the case and I prosecuted Hopkinson. And I made the argument that I said to the jury, I am against capital punishment. But we have a right to defend ourselves.
Well, Mark Hopkinson, of course, was executed in 1992. That was our last execution, the first in 26 years. And I'm wondering about your feelings about the case today. I mean, you had obviously strong feelings when you took the case in 1978. I'm wondering if anything has changed.
Nothing's changed with respect to my feeling about capital punishment. I tried to save Hopkinson's life. He used to send me letters and say he was going to have me skinned alive, and have my wife skinned alive, and all kinds of horrible things that he would say and send to me. He was quite a good-looking young man and very charismatic, but he was an evil guy. And I've never changed my view. If I would have been perfectly willing to, and would have been happy to have him spend his life in prison in Wyoming.
One of the things, of course, you're most famous for is your winning streak. When's the last time you lost a case?
I've never lost a criminal case as a prosecutor or as a defense attorney, and the last case that I lost, I think, was in 1969, a civil case.
You were asked at one point what would happen if you lost a case, and you said, well, it wouldn't make me less of a lawyer, but the pain would be, and this is a quote, so overwhelming, I would die just as surely as if a sword was put through me. Did you mean that? Or?
Yes, of course. Because the pain comes from when you see your client that you love and you've learned to love, and you can't. It's a process that of an exchange between yourself and this person that's charged with this crime, and you understand this person. You've lived with this person. You understand where they came from. You absorb their background. You care about them, and you see the sheriff put the chains on him and haul him out of the courtroom. And you think to yourself, it's my fault. If I had done something just a little better, if in the heat of the cross-examination I hadn't have been so angry, if along the way in the final argument I hadn't have forgotten to say whatever it was that I forgot to say. And it's my fault, because if I had done my job correctly, he would be free.
Cause I've been living inside of you, but I guess it's time I set me free, and there's nothing that you can do. I hope you can see.
I can't seem to keep people around me, cause I'm scared that they might know the truth all about me. Then they might doubt me, there's no other route. I wanted to shout, but it's too late now, cause I'm drowning. Got two-faced like I'm a clown, man. Life is too great, no, it's astounding. I'm in good shape, ma, but you know that I'm drowning like a cup in a cage. I can't cope with this hopelessness, though I try to be open and go with it, but I'm soaking in the pain like the wind never stop flowing in. As I'm floating in a glowing river through a golden gate, trying to motivate. Yeah, I do my fucking best, but there's two voices in my head, I just can't. I just fucking can't.
Cause I've been living inside of you, but I guess it's time I set me free, and there's nothing that you can do. I hope you can see, cause I've been living inside of you, but I guess it's time I set me free, and there's nothing that you can do. I hope you can see.
Babe, what you wanting like this? You be fine, trust me, just in time we get along. No, leave me alone. Why yes, can you see that you are alone, big? We're now sitting in our own throne, big. We need nobody, can you see it through? But it's not you who I should be listening to. Guess what, big? Nobody fucking needed you. No, and nobody fucking needed me. Yeah, they never needed us. Like when they nailed Jesus up, there's no fucking heaven, then they don't believe in us. But they my friend, I'm the only one that you can trust. Yeah, god damn it, you an idiot. Go online, be a slave for the media. Like you forgot what your father said. Are you serious? Look at yourself, big. You fucking idiots.
Cause I've been living inside of you, but I guess this time I set me free.
Oh, I love you.
And there's nothing that you can do.
Funny guy is always I see.
I hope you can see.
Can you see me? There's no one else.
Cause I've been living inside of you.
You have to accept it.
But I guess this time I set me free. And there's nothing that you can do.